تفضل الإمام حسين.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا مولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. ربنا زدنا علما وارزقنا فهما. اللهم إنا نسألك علما نافعا ورزقا واسعا وشفاء من كل داء.
آمين.
ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وأدخلنا الجنة مع الأبرار يا عزيز يا غفار يا رب العالمين. وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. الفاتحة.
الحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وأصحابه وبارك وسلم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Today's session, I think what we are going to do is essentially conclude on the issue of Qada and Qadr. But what we will do, we will go back to those issues that we've covered up to now. And I want to urge everyone to ask whatever questions you may have, because we don't know when we're going to be able to. We said, yes, we're going to revise and go through the complete session about all the sifat and especially these issues. But we don't know if time is going to allow us that luxury. So use this opportunity to ask whatever questions. Now that you have had some insight into some of these issues, you have an obligation to share it with other people. That obligation belongs to you now. You have to make sure that when you come across wrong perceptions or incorrect perceptions or confusion, it's your duty now to correct it. But before you can correct it, make sure that you have the correct understanding. So inshallah, with those few words, I want to go to what I would see as the start of the summary. And I'm glad that you all agreed about the flowcharts. Now, the summary in essence, the first thing that we want to say is, we spoke about the linked sifat. We know that it's knowledge, power, and will. I'm not going to repeat all of these things, but just so that we capture the salient points about the sifat of knowledge in relation to Qada and Qadr. The question of time never applying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is something that causes a lot of confusion when we talk about this particular topic. Because we are human beings whose lives are based and affected from the moment we are born by time and space, we find it extremely difficult to think outside of that. And even though we say time is a creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we tend to forget that when we move along. And we must remind ourselves constantly, in whatever form, time is never something that can be applied to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, especially when we talk about the sifat of knowledge. We must remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's knowledge was absolutely perfect, and nothing can be added to that perfect knowledge ever. It was perfect before creation and it's perfect post-creation. So whatever happens in creation can never ever add to more knowledge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will have. The second thing I think to remind us is that Allah has created and is aware of every single possibility that can happen in creation. And Allah has created those possibilities. And those possibilities are all known to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because Allah is the creator of those possibilities. So whatever happens in terms of new events happening in creation, or we are confronted with having to do something, we can never do something that Allah did not create the possibility for that to happen. It's impossible. Because why? If it is that we were able to do something that was not created as a possibility by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it means that we would be able to come up with something new that is not known to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, the final point around knowledge is to mention that something need not happen for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to know. Allah knows before we were even created. Allah knew everything that we were going to do, going to say, going to think, everything. Because time never applies to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, after the summary, I'm going to allow people, if you have any questions, I'm not going to pause on each of the three sifat. I would like you just to note the questions that you have, but be clear about the sifat, because if you understand this, it makes it easier to get the concept of predestination more clear in your own mind. The thing that we emphasized, and I think many people, many people fall in the trap by thinking that once they have power, that Allah has created them with free will, now they can do what they want to do with their own power after they're born. As a reminder, this is a type of belief that was associated with the Qadariyah. They believed that once they were born and Allah gave them choice, that they had the ability to create their own effect. They could do things on their own, and Allah doesn't interfere with that. It's a totally incorrect way of believing. And we've emphasized this point, and I'm restating it now, that effect can only be created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It never ever gets to a point where Allah gives you the power, and for that moment you have power. Because even if it's for a fraction of a second, if Allah were to give you power, there would be two centers of power: Allah's power and what Allah has transferred to you. So power never ever transfers, even if Allah uses a means, like the fire. We use the example of the fire. The fire doesn't have the inbuilt, or the bigger English word, inherent ability to burn. It never has that, never ever. Allah merely uses the fire as a means. But when Allah uses the fire as a means, it's used as a means for us to associate fire with burning. But to know and understand that the effect of burning doesn't belong to the fire. No effect belongs to anything in creation. Allah is the one who creates the effect, the only one who can make things happen. We don't have that ability. So that power, I think it's absolutely crucial for us to understand that the power never transfers to the means. Now, on this one, we had quite a few sessions. The will, the divine will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I think here we refer to the Jabariyah, who believed correctly as far as one part of their belief was, and they based their entire belief system on this, that nothing can happen in creation if it is not the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Is that correct? Yes, 100% correct. Nothing can happen if it is not the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because if something can happen outside the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there would in fact be more than one will to determine what happens. So whatever we see in the entire creation, whether it's an object or whether it's an event, that thing is an expression of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's will. It is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has willed for it to be. If Allah wills for it not to be, it can never be. And I think the point where we separated the two components insofar as it relates to the qada and qadr or predestination was the scholars who have studied the subject have made it easy for us. They said we should look at two components of the will. Now, when we say two components of the will, it is merely to clarify it for ourselves. I think we must be extremely careful that we never define the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as two wills. Allah's will is one. Everything about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is one. Nothing about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can be divided into parts or components. Nothing. No matter how you think about it, no matter how it's described, it is a fundamental concept that we must ingrain in ourselves. It speaks to the sifat of oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Oneness, not only that it's the only one, but it is also not divisible into parts or components. But to make it easy for us, the scholars have referred to the two components of the divine will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as having the universal will, which is unchangeable. And those are the laws, it's strict, it's fixed. Nothing can change it. And then there is the legislative will, which refers to, like we refer to the Sharia as the law, this will is referred to as the legislative will. Now, why is it that the law is made? Allah makes the law, but yet we can change the law. This is where freedom of choice comes in. Allah says, I would like you to do X, Y, and Z and stay away from A, B, and C. But I'm not going to compel you to do it. I'm going to give you the choice. That is your test as insan, to test whether you will make the right choices. Now, those things that Allah prohibits and commands, those things fall under the universal will and pertains to human beings. Essentially, not only because the universal will can apply to events that affects us, for example, rain or drought or something like that. Can we impact on the rain or the drought? Yes, through our deeds, through dua. We can. So some of the things is not only what relates to human beings, but things that can be changed that fall in that category that's called the legislative will. And our deeds and our actions has been clearly spelled out in the Quran and the Sunnah. So if we take these three things together and we have a clear, solid idea, then the concept of what qada and qadr is should actually be a lot easier than it may have been before. So before I move on, knowledge, power, and will. Those are the three things that I want us to respond to, especially in relation to how we understand predestination. But if there's anything about the sifat, then please feel free. Remember, we are talking about sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, attributes that belongs to Allah. So I open the floor, and I would like everyone and encourage them to participate very actively, so that we can move on to the next session with everyone generally on the same page, inshallah. So I open the floor now. Anyone want to kick off? Welcome, Yunus. You don't want to kick off, Yunus?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Habibi, tafaddal.
Akramakallah. Okay, so in summary for me, the concept of predestination basically comes down to there are certain things which we have a choice in, or an ability, or rather the choice in whether we can change or influence the legislative world, and there are certain things that we cannot affect. We are limited to an extent within our choices. So that is basically the underlying concept for me. There are certain things that we have a choice in, like within our actions, within how we affect our lifespan. And the example that Salie just gave now about the rain and drought, there are things that we, through our deeds, can have an effect within our lives, within this realm of time. And that is also limited. Allah is the one that gives effect to everything. So within our choices, that is where Allah gives effect to. But we, in terms of our bad deeds, we can't say, and we can't place blame on Allah to say, yes, but if Allah is the doer, then the team that did it, that's something that just struck me now. So,
okay.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Okay, Muhammad Fasih, I saw you put your mic on.
Thank you, Sam, Salie, and everyone. Well, I think it's much the same as has been explained. The fact that all of these attributes are telling us that Allah is the owner of will. It's only Allah's will that will be affected, number one. Allah is the owner of knowledge, and Allah is the owner of power. So there is nothing that can come from us. We cannot compete with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in terms of Allah's power, Allah's will, and Allah's knowledge. In fact, we are receiving of knowledge as a result of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dispensing of that knowledge. But even then, but dispensing, it does not, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not affected negative. It's not like you pour water out of a glass and there's less water in the glass now than there was before. And also, from what I understand, is that every aspect of what we do in terms of asking Allah for guide, asking Allah for a long life, and asking Allah for different things, that at every step, these are guided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, in actual fact, number one, the fact that we can make dua, Allah allows us to make the dua. The fact that we can change our condition, Allah has set out the conditions for us to do that. Allah set out the fact that we can make tawbah. The only thing that we actually have access over is our will and our desire. And whatever our will is pointed at, if Allah has pointed that we can change that on a certain level, we'll be able to change it. if Allah has decreed that it is from the universal will, that thing will not be affected, then it will not be affected. If it's from the legislative will and it can change, then there is a capacity for us to change.
Alhamdulillah. Is there anyone else who would like to maybe offer a comment? Because I was going to put up a slide or my flow charts. And here if, oh, let me put up the flow chart and then I'll take the next round. I've taken the three linked sifat, power, will, and knowledge, and just put it up there. Even if it's only going to be used as a reference when you look through this as a reminder for you. You probably now have this concept clear in your own mind, but let me do that. Let me do that quickly. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us free will and choice. Allah offered it to us. You remember when we were in the angelic form, in the form of our ruh, before we were even born, Allah gave us the option of accepting or not accepting free will and choice. It was offered to the entire creation. We were the ones who accepted free will and choice. Yet we have this concept of predestination. Now, without going into all of that, because I've got a different flow chart, this one I just want to capture the essence of that Allah, the three sifat that we outlined, the three linked sifat. We have knowledge, we have power, and we have will. Now, the first thing to say is our free will and choice. You don't think and then and that's it. Your thinking or your choices results in an action. At the very least, it should. You can't choose to do something and then you choose another thing, but you never ever do anything. It's absurd. All our actions and our deeds are preceded by choices that we make in our lives. So yes, we have free will and choice, and that's what Allah gave us. Now, under normal circumstances, for the person who has not been exposed to this kind of knowledge, and some of our the people in the previous eras, they made this mistake. Allah gave us free will and choice. Now we can do an act. They thought that was it. But we have said that there are certain things, insofar as knowledge is concerned, power is concerned, and will is concerned, that impacts on our deeds. The three linked sifat. The first one is, we talk about knowledge, is that we can only do if Allah created that possibility. I was going to say, can you fly? Maybe there is some of you who can fly. I mean, I don't want to underestimate who's out there. But generally, if Allah created the possibility for you to fly, you will be able to fly. If Allah did not create that possibility, you will never fly. So that possibility exists in Allah's all-knowing knowledge of what Allah has created. Every single possibility of what we can do, every single thing, doesn't matter what it is. Allah has created all those possibilities, and all those possibilities exist within the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, possibility means, what does the word possible mean? Possible, well, the obvious one that one can say, possible is that which is not impossible. That's a simple one. But there's another understanding of possible. Possible is it can be or it cannot be. It can exist or it may not exist. Unlike the sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Is that, can we say that's possible? The sifat of Allah is possible? No. It forms part of what is compulsory. It must be there. It must, if you're describing Allah, you must have all the sifat there, which we've covered in a fair amount of detail previously. So when we talk about possibility, then that possibility has been created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah knows about that because Allah created those possibilities long before creation even came into being. It exists within the overall knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, what we can do and what we can't do is governed by the possibilities that Allah created. Okay? The second thing is that knowledge impacts on our deeds and our actions. If we talk about power, we said power, as we just said earlier, power is the fact that only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone can create effect. So unlike the Qadariya who believe they've been given choice, now they can do. We can never do. Allah created the doer and the actions of the doer. Allah created the doer and the actions of the doer. Imprint that in our minds. So without power, we will not be able to give effect to our actions. And we talk about the will. Nothing can happen outside the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that we said, and there's two aspects to it: the universal will, unchangeable, fixed. Whatever Allah has willed will go through all the phases, stages, and it will remain intact, like Allah has willed it. Or it could be something that's part of the legislative will, where our actions and our deeds can impact on the will. What is the key point, the takeaway point of this one? We never know what the will of Allah is. No one knows what the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. So, you put in maximum effort in the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has instructed us. You do whatever you must do. And then you leave it in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's hands. So I think this, for me, is more a summary of the previous thing. I'm going to go to a more complicated one after this, but I want to hear whether that assists to capture it together with the previous slide that I've given. Let's just hear quickly before I move on. Do I move on? Okay.
In summary, that is spot on, Mr. Salie. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Okay. So I move on. Now I've taken the same simple flowchart and I've populated it a bit more, because life is not so simple as 3 blocks there and another 2 blocks and daar's alles uitgesort. Life is a lot more complicated. And the more knowledge Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens up for us, the more complicated it becomes. And more blocks and more blocks. But let's say Allah has now given us choice. And Allah has decreed certain things. Now these are the 2 contending points that people can't reconcile. They can't find a way of what's another word for reconcile? they can't come to terms with the fact that Allah has determined certain things in our life and that we are given choice. How does choice fit in with the fact that Allah has predetermined certain things, and on top of that, Allah is the doer? Allah is the doer, the only one who can create effect, and at the end of the day, we're either going to get reward or punishment. So this is where we started off. Now, hopefully the confusion must get less and less and less as we move along. So we have choice on the one side and predestination on the other side. Now, when we talk about predestination, we said there's the 3 sifat that's linked to that: will, power, and knowledge. And I'm just putting it together, how it impacts on it. It's basically the same thing, but it helps. What we must remember is that predestination is not a sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's an action. It's an action. Knowledge is a sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the fact that knowledge is and will and power are 3 of the linked sifat that we must understand correctly. So the knowledge of what is going to be predestined or predetermined or decreed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is known by Allah before Allah even does it. Manie vir my vra hoe nie. Now, part of the knowledge refers to also what is contained in the preserved tablet. Now, Imam Hussein last week asked a question about can we say the universal will is the preserved tablet? Brilliant question. Is it or is it not? I haven't come across the question before anywhere, but because I'm a bit more certain about my Tawhid now, I could answer it without even thinking. The preserved tablet is a creation. The sifat of knowledge is an attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They're not the same. Creation can never ever be the same as a sifat or the essence or anything about Allah. Creation never becomes creator, and creator doesn't become creation ever, 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 ever. Please imprint that in our minds. Creator, Rabb, and Abd never comes together, ever. We always remain Abd, and Allah always remains Rabb. So, the preserved tablet is a creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but Allah's knowledge encompasses that. So now we've got our choices to make, and we would like to do certain things. So what are the things? We're just quickly going to go over that. The first thing is there's the legislative will that we must consider, and power, because without the power, we won't be able to give effect to our deeds. We won't be able to make it happen. And the legislative will Allah will either allow us to do it or not do it. Never mind the change. There's the aspect of whatever we want to do. We don't have power, but it's almost as if the power, Allah is there to create the effect, giving effect to our choices, but the legislative will gives us the permission, if you understand what I'm saying. This is to explain it. It doesn't, I mean, we're using worldly terminology and examples to explain very difficult concepts. So the legislative will is the will of Allah. Nothing can happen outside of the will. So how do we get that Allah gives permission for it to happen? So it happens. There's the aspect that if it's the legislative will, our actions can impact on what Allah has decreed, predestined. So it can or it cannot change destiny. That's up to Allah, even though it falls under the legislative will. It doesn't mean every action has a guaranteed effect. And then, of course, that information is not written in the tablet. It was in the tablet. It was in the preserved tablet before we even were given choice, before we were even busy trying to do X or Y. It was already recorded in the tablet, because the tablet doesn't depend on time. The Lawhil Mahfuz is an archive of the entire history written before the history was written. If I can say that. We still had to go through all the motions. The Lawhil Mahfuz is recording the end before we've even started at the beginning, because time never applies to Allah. But we've discussed that, and I'm glad most people understand the concept of time not applying and how that information is captured in the preserved tablet. Then, of course, there's the other part of the will, which is the universal will, and that part is fixed, cannot change. Whatever Allah has decreed, you're going to die at 40, you're going to die at 40. Jika maar dua maak, make dua, good deeds, whatever, your reward will come in a different form. But that thing Allah has decreed, I am going to put you under those conditions to test whether you will do X or Y, and I'm not going to change it. I'm going to leave it like that. And that information, of course, is also in the preserved tablet. Before you even get born. So everything is in the preserved tablet. Your deeds eventually goes to your book of deeds, which is written, and on the day of Qiyamah, you will come there. But the book of deeds, also in the preserved tablet. Everything that is going to affect your life is recorded in the preserved tablet after it's already been done. It's already recorded. And of course, your deeds determine, will be weighed on the scale. And how it will be weighed is also in the preserved tablet. So that's why when Allah decreed who's going to Jannah and Jahannam, all of these things all of these things in the dark blue, our choices, our deeds, our book of deeds, all of these things have actually played itself out already. And it doesn't matter what the outcome is, it is known by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in a sense, that's what I have put up. Now, I think that ought to be very clear. But if we look at that one, is there anything else that is cropped up here, or that you think has made it more clear? Then please, I'm just gonna pause for a couple of moments here and here if you have any questions. So the floor is open once again.
Salie,
Imam Hussein.
you must help me out here now.
Yes.
We say that the preserved tablet is a creation.
Yes.
Right. However, the the knowledge and the stuff contained in the preserved tablet, right?
Yes.
The sifats, we say, power, will, and knowledge, it's always been with, it's like uncreated. It's uncreated, whereas the preserved tablet is created.
Yeah.
So all the what you call it, the things contained in the preserved tablet, is that created? The things contained in the preserved tablet. The preserved tablet is a creation.
Yeah.
But the stuff contained in there that will happen, is that also created or uncreated?
Now, if you will answer your own question. If I ask you a question, you will answer your own question. Can a created entity contain that which is uncreated?
Can a created? No.
There's your answer. Everything we are talking about here refers to what is happening in creation. Obviously, we're not referring to the will and the power, the sifat. The sifat we know belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything else relates to events or processes within creation. So your answer...
I'm just onto the fact that the preserved tablet is a creation of Allah. The things contained in the preserved tablet, that's the question
yes,
which I'm grappling with.
Everything contained in the preserved tablet is limited by the fact that it's a created thing. It is a created thing. So what does anything that has created? It has a beginning, it has an end, it's imperfect, it's waiting to be created, and there will be a point at which it doesn't exist anymore. So that's the preserved tablet. So whatever is contained in the preserved tablet, we mustn't make the mistake to think that the preserved tablet contains all of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's knowledge. It does not. Knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only belongs to Allah and not to creation. Does that clarify it? When we say Allah is all-knowing, but the preserved tablet contains an entire history of what is going to happen in creation. Creation started at a certain point and will end at another point. Everything there that's being recorded is creation. Allah's sifat about knowledge impacts on that. Allah's sifat and names impact on the entire creation.
So we can say it's a difference of sifat and action. Sifat and action, which is the action is like created by the sifat.
You see, now it becomes technical and difficult. But the sifat itself is not separate from Allah. The names are not separate from Allah. That we can kind of easily understand. That belongs to Allah. You're actually talking about Allah now. If you're talking about that sifat, you're actually talking about Allah. But we find it difficult, and even the scholars find it extremely difficult to take action now of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and say, that belongs to Allah, comes from Allah and belongs to Allah. But we now fall in the trap by looking at what Allah has created. In fact, Ibn Arabi speaks a lot about, you know, how we should understand. We get now into some very deep and technical concepts about Wahdatul Wujud, where people say that everything in creation is in fact Allah, because those are the actions of Allah. But we're not going to go there. If time ever allows and people really want to, we can go into that. To come back to the point, let me put up the slide again. The preserved tablet is a book. It's the mother of all books, but it's a book that Allah created. It's not Allah. It's one of the things that Allah created. Knowledge, is knowledge Allah? I'm asking a question. Is knowledge Allah?
It's a sifat of Allah.
It's a sifat of Allah, but is that sifat Allah?
Sifat is different with that.
The sifat is not Allah, but it's not other than Allah. It doesn't belong to anyone else other than Allah, but you can't say the sifat is Allah. Then every sifat is Allah. So there are so many different sifat. It's one of those difficult ones where Ibn Arabi coined this phrase about it. It is, but it's not. And this would we say. So knowledge, when we talk about knowledge, we are talking about the sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is unknowable. There is no link to its perfection to anything in creation. Yes, it makes use of that sifat, or the sifat is applicable to that. But the preserved tablet is limited to what is contained in creation. And knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the sifat, is unending and it's absolutely perfect. Like, for example, I was going to use power, but now we can't use power because we are now. But I had to ask you this question before we actually said Allah created the doer and the actions of the doer. If it would be the same as Allah is all powerful, so Allah gives power to you to go and do X and Y at the level of Islam, and you do it. You also have power now. In the same way, Allah's knowledge is perfect. Allah makes available some of that knowledge, and it's recorded on the preserved tablet, but the tablet can never be compared or it's dissimilar. It's one of the sifats, but nothing is like Allah. There's nothing similar to Allah. Even the preserved tablet. There's nothing similar. No, there's no similarity. There's no comparison. But all Allah's sifat has impact on creation. Because Allah impacts on the entire creation. Whew. Imam Hussein, I don't know if I... Yes.
تمام ik kan nog niet ليس كمثله شيء وهو السميع العليم
ja,
niks is dat Allah gecreëerd het as 'n mens die difference sien dat niks is soos Allah nie.
yeah. And that's actually the point that one should understand as one of the aspects of it, but Allah's perfection does not allow for anything to share in that. It's unique, it's alone, it's part of wahdaniyah, the oneness of Allah, that every sifat is a sifat in its own right, and nothing actually participates or shares in that.
Soos byvoorbeeld all-knowing. Ons kry maar net ons knowledge van Allah.
Yeah.
Um,
In the same way, yes. But Imam Hussein, let me hear if you're okay with that, or you still.
Yes, I just need to delve, to spend more time to grasp,
No, but
to get the connection right.
if you ask these questions, it means that you are on the path of actually sorting out your Tawhid in the correct manner. Because the moment you get to the point, you know for a fact, because preserved tablet is created, it can never be part of or share in any sifat, because it's created. Like our power, our abilities, anything out there, our knowledge, nothing compares with Allah's knowledge. Yet Allah gives us knowledge. But it doesn't mean that it becomes part of that. And the preserved tablet is limited. By its very nature that it's been created, it's limited by everything that limits creation, and makes it also dissimilar from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Is there anything else on this flowchart that anyone else wish to clarify, or maybe there's a question? Does it mean we've covered this topic of Qada and Qadr now? I am so pleased, because at least there are no more questions. Let me just see what I was going to. Oh no, I was going to do something else now. No, I'm going to leave that for next time. Or let me just say what I was gonna. I was going to take this part of the previous diagram that we did and talk about the actions, more about the actions. How does the nafs, the ruh, and the heart impact on our actions? But we'll get to there. Now, before we conclude our session, I would like some guidance now. You must tell me what the next step is, because we're going to move off now from the topic of Qada and Qadr. We've got one of two options. Let me just put this up for you. Here you can see. This tries to capture, in fact, our role here on the dunya, kind of, in a very busy diagram, where Allah has given us choice, and there's the nafs and the shaitan here on this side. And then Allah gave us the Quran and the Sunnah and the Ruh, and within that Allah gave us the divine names. So on this side of the world, you have the good, and on the other side you have the distractions and the bad, and your mind and your choice sits in between, and you have to decide how you're going to live your life. Now, each block needs a little bit of explanation. We can do that. Or if we don't do that, and then we bring in the nafs and how it works. Or, and this, well, I'm not even sure. You must guide me now. We start with the names. Chef's other book on the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where we go through each name, and I have a specific approach that tries to make it practical knowledge. Pretty much like Imam Ghazali has done in his book. In fact, when I prepared for the and wrote in book 3 on the names, I actually used Sheikh's book and that book that Imam Hussein posted on the 99 names of Imam Ghazali, his book. I use those as the primary sources of reference. So we can do the names, or we can go straight into these areas here that I have put up the flow chart. We talk about the nafs and the ruh, and how do we understand the relationship between the heart and the ruh and the nafs? How do we purify? I'm leaving it up to you because there's so much to do. I'm sure we're gonna be running out of time. Not just today, but in terms of all the things there is to say and to do. But
I've got a suggestion, Tamani.
Yes.
Seeing that we're busy with the sifats, and each sifat has got a couple of names that's linked
Yes.
to the sifat.
Yes.
Of the 99 names, there's like 3 or 4 names that would be linked to knowledge, or to will,
or power,
or to power,
forgiveness,
and like that, the others as well. And I think the book which I've posted, not on the names, Tawhid, the Sheikh does it. He, if he handles a sifat, then he go fetches like 3, 4 names that explains the certain sifat. So maybe you must just
I've gone
see in the book how he does it.
Yeah, you see, he has done that. He has done that, and I think it's a fantastic book. I would urge everyone to make time to read through the book that Imam Hussein posted, because it does that. My approach would be slightly different. My approach, if I use the names, I would give a basic understanding of the name. Then I take the name and I look for how the name manifests itself in creation, for examples in creation, so that we can be reminded, oh, there's Allah. Allah says, look, open your eyes, I'm everywhere. Look for Allah in creation. See the manifestation of Allah. Now, I would want us to, my approach would be to do that. And then the other element of that is to actually take the name and say, how do we take the name and its understanding? How do we implement the name and associate ourselves and our conduct and our behavior with a particular name so that it can improve the state of our hearts? So it's slightly different. But the work that has been done to take the names and look for the connection to the other things has been done very well. And I'm not that kind of scholar who is necessarily equipped to see all the links everywhere. Because actually, what are we talking about if we're talking about the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? In the same way, we're talking about Allah. Every name that we are talking about is, Yunus is a person who wears a fez. Yunus is tall. Yunus is handsome. Yunus is clever. Everything that we said refers to Yunus, and that's what the names are. So you get to know Yunus. Oh, Yunus is handsome, he's clever, he wears a fez and spectacles. And that's how you get to know Yunus. That's how Allah made it easier for us with the names. But we get to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in order to worship Him better. How do we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala better? By purifying our hearts. And how do we purify our hearts? By changing our behavior and our conduct. So I try to pull out from the names ways to assist us on that purification of the heart. But let me hear because if you say that that is what we must do, then I don't have a choice. But it would be easier for me because I've got some stuff prepared already on the names that I've had to present elsewhere, you know.
But the other people must also say what they.
Yes. Let's hear Yunus, Muhammad Fasir.
Yunus Fasir, what do you say?
Aisha, Noura.
That's my choice as well, the sifats of Allah.
The names.
That's my path, getting to know Allah.
Okay. Bye-bye.
I think Brother Salie, the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would be key because it would help us engage with the subject matter by looking at Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explains himself to us. So that would also give us a key into not only how our adab with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but also what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala expects of us in a sense. Because Allah expects us, obviously not to be perfect, but to be His vicegerents on earth, to conduct ourselves in a sovereign manner, in reflection, in a tiny little way of how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, should I say, just as a reflection of the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, having deployed us here. So I think the names would be a way to link ourselves to that statement.
Okay. I must be honest. I must be very honest with you. When I attached myself to Sheikh Hazim, I've been reading a lot about Tasawwuf, Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jailani's books, Imam Ghazali's books, and so on. But when I attached myself to Sheikh and I was exposed to his book on monotheism, I said to myself, I'm dropping everything. I want to get to know Allah better first, and I must get to know my Tawhid. And that motivated me to start writing and putting these things down in the form that I have. And then after I've done that, I asked myself, now what now? And then I said, well, is the answer not obvious? Sheikh gave you the answer already by supplying you with the book of the names. And that's where I went. So I went that route because in that, you now come with that information, and now you want to look at the heart and the mind and the nafs and all of that. Makes it easier. And some of it will enter there anyway. Some of it is going to enter anyway in the discussion, all the other things when we discuss. So Imam Hussein, if you're also in agreement, then we're going to go to the names, inshallah. But
Inshallah.
I must be honest.
Yeah.
That what I would like to do maybe is just spend some time to, even if it is just
Breaking up.
Even if it's just for the purpose of recording it, that you have a record of it for yourself. Or you have access to it through the YouTube channel, to just quickly go through this one, this flow chart here. Not long, because most of it is kind of covered, and then we introduce the topic of the names. Maybe we do that for the next session.
Inshallah.
So we go through this one as a start, and it doesn't mean that we should exclude any questions that may have arisen today or in the past about those things that we've covered. If anything crops up, feel free to raise it anywhere, anytime. It's not right to move on to new areas if we still have unanswered or uncertainty or doubts about some of the previous stuff. So inshallah, what we'll do, we're going to go through this flow chart, which will be oh no, that's even another one. Ek het gedink nou, ja, ek sal nou baie werk moet gedoen het nou to go back to the drawing board, so to speak. But inshallah, we're going to do that. Start there with that flow chart, and from that on, we're going to introduce the names. I would urge people to look at, if you have time, there's enough material. Imam Ghazali's book, Sheikh's book on the names, and what I've tried to do, I've tried to take Sheikh's book, Imam Ghazali's book, and Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jailani's books, many books, try to pull out from those things and try to put it in a summarized form. So there's also book 3, which is the Essentials of Tawhid. The latter part deals with the names of one of the books that I have uploaded on the website. So you can also look at that. So try and familiarize yourself with the topic. And obviously the one that we're going to start with is the divine name, and the personal name, Allah. We're going to start there, inshallah. We might not get into it in total, but we're going to start with that. Are there any final comments or questions?
Haji Yunus is still.
Yeah.
Absorbing.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. I was going to say that I concur with Imam Hussein's suggestion, since we are dealing with Tawhid. But again, I was going to say the concepts of the nafs, the dunya, the ruh, it did get me excited. So inshallah.
You see, we sit with the problem of time now. Where do we fit in all of these things? And even the time we have available is not enough. But Allah knows best. Even if we just touch on what I'm going to try and do, I'm going to skip some of the stuff we've done previously and just mention them, but focus more on those aspects about the ruh and the nafs and the, the heart and the mind, and how they just touch on it very briefly, so that at least your appetite is not so desperate. Imam Hussein,
there isn't perhaps a feeling amongst the guys that we want to do a repeat of from the start again to this point where we are now.
I can't hear.
Just, you don't have to agree with me.
Yes, you see, if we want to do justice to a revised session on this, then I would have wanted to go in deeper into some of the stuff. It's going to be a bit at a slightly next level, where we don't add only. And I want to say The problem at the next level is it becomes more difficult now. And there's a lot of science that one must actually grapple with and understand. Because what is science? It's the creation of Allah, what Allah has ordered us to look at. And I've gone into some of these things. In fact, in the names, I will probably go into, in fact, come to think of it, what I will do, Imam Hussein, I will see if I can focus on the sifat, where the sifat and the name matches, and highlight those ones before I move on to other ones. So it would be almost like trying to do both at the same time. If you understand what I'm saying. Or were
Yes,
you
yes, but
right from scratch?
no, I'm just thinking you mustn't overburden yourself with all the work just to accommodate us. So the things which you've already prepared, I think you must just carry on with that. Ons kan nie vir Boeta Salie so vir 'n Vienie.
No, alhamdulillah. I must say one thing though, it's actually quite the opposite. And I'm not saying this because I want to sound modest or I want to sound humble, but I truly, honestly believe that you have presented me with a great gift and an opportunity to present some of this knowledge to you. You have given me the gift to share. So it's not the other way around, that I am doing. You don't want me to make it difficult for me. Make it difficult.
But I'm benefiting because of you.
Yes.
So I must be grateful to you.
Yes, Tasani.
And I am
Grateful.
extremely grateful to you for making it possible and giving me the opportunity. You know, it's like the beggar. It's just another way of looking at the beggar coming to you. He asks you for money to buy food, or Jenny eats down for me to eat me. He asks you that. The first thing is you're doing him a favor. That's the first approach. But the next level is the beggar is giving you an opportunity to do what Allah wants you to do. So, miskien will ek het combine. I'm very grateful and thankful that you people are giving me this opportunity to share.
Likewise, we grateful and thankful for you, Tasali.
Sit in die preserve tablet.
Alhamdulillah. Okay, so I'm going to take all the points. I'm going to take all the points that you've made, and I will take it into account. I'm gonna try and start off with whetting Eunice's appetite with that first flow chart, and then we're going to go over to the names, inshallah. So Imam, who's going to make dua for us?
Eunice.
No, Tafasir.
تفسير. تفضل فسيح محمد فسيح.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى سيدنا محمد وصحبه وسلم اللهم افتح لنا بالخير واختم لنا بالخير واجعل عواقب أمورنا بالخير بيدك الخير والعافية إنك على كل شيء قدير دعواهم فيها سبحانك اللهم وتحيتهم فيها سلام وآخر دعواهم أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.
شكرا جزيلا. Allah be pleased.
Shukran everybody.
Alhamdulillah. Shukran everyone. I look forward to next week. You know, I look forward to these classes more than anyone else. I can't wait for the day to come. Like tonight, I'm already gonna think, oh, wanneer is het Sondag? I really look forward to this. So, shukran to everyone for affording me this opportunity. Muhammad Fasih.
Shukran, Dr. Salie. Assalamualaikum.
Walaikum salam.
Sorry, I missed Sunday's class. I also look so forward to these classes.
Alhamdulillah.
I'm grateful for the recordings. Yes, alhamdulillah.
Yeah, I think we should, even if we don't have many people, we're going to continue with the recording, because many other people who have missed, or some other people, not many, some of the people, they, in fact, I send them the recordings, or I give them the link. And shukran to Yunus for having done such a fantastic job to send the recordings out to people. That's absolute great one. Can I for Yunus net vra, don't you want to become the admin of this group of ours? Because
he's already the admin with Salie. He's already the admin.
Easy. Then he must send out the notices too, please, Yunus.
The notices for
you know, like every Wednesday and Sunday, because now I contact Mudathir and he's not always here with us. It would be better for somebody who is regular like you to send out the notices and whatever other information we might have.
No, but
Puta Yunus is my right-hand man on the Sunni chat.
It is all with that Imam Hussein. It's got nothing to do with me.
He's the Shaykhul Hikam. Shaykhul Hikam.
In fact, Imam kom maar nou eers agter. Hy was en hy is my right-hand man alle jare.
I think I need to go now.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Yunus, before you go, can you get the flow charts on the chat, Kanala?
I just took a few shots now of this session, so I'll see it later, inshallah.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah.
Inshallah. Sien Salie.
Ek kan sien.
Ons kan nie vra vir beter nie.
To Yunus, ek en Yunus saam vir Sheikh had visited in Jordan, and to's Yunus die hele technical ou. He had what do you call it, the tablet, and he took all the recordings.
Not the preserved tablet, no.
Hoekom mense is nou ready om vir jou te type? Can you send me some info on this and that? Shukran, guys. Everything on the Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam. Salam, Pandika Yakanala.
Wa alaikum salam. Muhammad Fasih, I'll phone you on the phone.
Inshallah.
Because I want to capture the recording on here.
Right, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam.